Welcome to Meet the Ocean, an audio theater podcast that shares the story of Earth's saltwater ecosystems. I am your host, Paul North, a polar diving science communicator that wants you to enjoy yourself while you're learning about your planet. Our latest episode featured the saltwater crocodiles of Australia. And fear not, for today's creature is no less of a predator. But before we dive in, here are some things worth sharing. Meet the Ocean has recently returned from 2 weeks of diving in Alaska. It was cold and wonderful. The water was 41 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 5 Celsius for our international friends, and I found 4 species that I've never seen before with my own eyes. Mostly because they were really, really tiny. It's okay. I have a macro lens. Special thanks to Charles Backus and his family and the Sitka Sound Science Center for hosting us and making all things possible. While in Alaska, we had a great virtual interaction with Phoenix Children's Hospital to share the many colorful creatures that we found, and our conservation film, Winter in Antarctica, a collaboration that features over 40 creatives, underwater media from the Southern Ocean, and performances from the best of the Las Vegas acrobatic community. A film that was accomplished during a pandemic when performers who were out of work chose to speak for their planet. This film is still winning awards and getting chosen for film festivals around the world. Most recently, the Amsterdam World International Film Festival. It's 30 minutes long, a fundraiser for our nonprofit, and for $15, you get to watch it as many times as your penguin-loving heart desires. You can check it out at winterinantarctica.com. The story of our planet is a story we share. Meet the Ocean is a listener-supported 501c3 nonprofit. Please support our educational outreach in any way you can. It starts by visiting and sharing our website, meettheocean.org. And now, let's get back in the water because there is a large pinniped who would like to say hello to you. For choosing to explore Antarctica, many thought Ernest Shackleton a fool. The dangers outweighed the rewards, some thought. Others thought him brave. Even legendary. But brave as he was, Shackleton never went diving in the Southern Ocean. He never did what David Cothran did. There are many ways to explore what Antarctica is and what it is not. Stories prevail. Monsters exist. Today, you will hear 3 stories from one man. 3 stories about one species, 3 encounters, and all of the bubbles. David Cothran is a godfather of Antarctic exploration. If you don't believe me, Google the Antarctic Underwater Field Guide and you will discover over 900 images of marine species from the Southern Ocean. They are taxonomically organized and worth your time to explore. To be underwater in Antarctica is a thing that is difficult to explain, but few do it better than the naturalist, photographer, and polymath that you are now to enjoy.
I'm David Cothran, and this is Meet the Ocean Encounters. As a diver, with the privilege I've had of diving all around the world, I've gotten to see wonderful, wonderful variety of marine life, and that's why I dive. I like wreck diving, I like blue water diving, but what really turns me on, I'm a biologist, so what really turns me on about diving is the incredible communities of life, the incredible different species that live in our planet's oceans. And one of the most amazing animals I've ever seen underwater is the leopard seal. Leopards are true seals. They're big. They generally are around 10 feet long or so. A big female will weigh 1,000 pounds or more. But they're really unusual seals. They Most seals are kind of blubbery and, not very, well, I can't say they're not graceful underwater, but they, especially true seals. Now, the sea lions tend to have a faster, more flying kind of motion underwater. True seals tend to be kind of like blubber sausages, and they can swim well, but the leopard seal is an exception. They are amazingly fluid underwater, and just watching them swim is enthralling. They twist and turn and use their big pectoral flippers, their front flippers, to with wings to steer themselves and to give themselves the power strokes. They're long and slender, different shape than almost any seal is, and that gives them a different look in the water than any other seal, and it gives them a grace. They're ferociously, or they're ferocious looking animals. Leopards are often not really very aggressive at all. They're very smart. They're very curious. They often approach divers and want to know what's going on, but they have a delicacy to them somehow. Even though they're big and strong and can be very fierce, there's something about them in the water, when you see them underwater, that makes them beautiful. So I've had a few encounters with leopards diving in the Antarctic, all of them unplanned. We kind of had a rule, after a while anyway, that we didn't get into the water if we knew there was a leopard nearby. But on several occasions, I've been met by a leopard while I was in the water. And those were always really enjoyable, but really thrilling and kind of edgy encounters. The thing about leopard seals is that they're not usually aggressive, and a lot of people that I've spoken with feel that it's really pretty safe to dive with them. But my feeling is that you just don't know. And people have spent a lot of time around brown bears, lived with them, lived side by side with them, hung out with them day after day after day, year after year after year, and the brown bears didn't seem dangerous at all until the day that they killed and ate the person. That's the nature of wild animals. They are totally unpredictable. And the fact of the matter is with leopards that they don't usually attack, they're not usually aggressive, but if you happen to meet the one that's having a bad day, it can rip your leg off in 1 second, and that's it. So I always was very nervous around leopards, even though I thought they were absolutely gorgeous animals to be around. So in some ways, meeting one underwater was not what I wanted, but in some ways I was also kind of happy about it because it was such a cool thing to see. But usually my habit was to, when I saw the leopard, to kind of get out of the water slowly. The first really good encounter I had with the leopard was at Booth Island, near the place where Jean-Baptiste Charcot, the French Antarctic explorer, overwintered on his first expedition to the Antarctic. And I was in the water just filming average marine life. There were a few fish around, which is always good for an Antarctic dive. Some beautiful big anemones. I think I saw a couple of Weddell seals on that dive. No, I'm sorry, crab-eater seals. But then as I was coming up, big leopard appeared. And it was my real first meeting with a leopard, and I was kind of learning all this stuff about how I felt about them as far as being really gorgeous animals. The leopard's habit when they meet a diver seems to be to slowly circle. As I said, they're really kind of curious. They seem to want to establish what the diver is and what it's doing in their place. Leopards are, at least to a degree, territorial. They have a place where they hang out in the breeding season for penguins to eat, and in other seasons, other things. Leopards' diet is not at all penguins. They eat a lot of krill. But anyway, I think the leopards are approach divers because they're curious. What is this thing that's like seal-sized in my territory, and why is it blowing all these bubbles? Blowing bubbles is something that seals seldom do underwater, and when they do, it's often a challenge to other seals. So this leopard came up and was circling me slowly. They'll do this really odd thing where they come in close and kind of hang in the water in front of you and turn their head to the side about 90 degrees and then turn their head back around to the other side around 90 degrees, always looking at you like they're trying to go, what angle am I supposed to look at this thing from? And sometimes they'll go right upside down. They'll make a full rotation, like a barrel roll, all the way around while staring into your face or into your camera. It may be, too, that they see themselves reflected in the front lens of our cameras. That's certainly a possibility and something that would, of course, make them pretty curious. So I started up. I swam up along the bottom. The leopard was going up to get a breath and then coming back down to take a look at me. And it was a good first encounter. The leopard was not aggressive at all, and I felt pretty comfortable about the situation. So I got up to the top, and when I got to the surface at the rocky shore of Booth Island, then the leopard kind of pinned me in to a little notch in the rocks. It was swimming back and forth very energetically right there in front of me, and that was starting to make me pretty uncomfortable. But my safety boat came in, and actually a friend of mine came by in another Zodiac that was not being used at the moment, and kind of fended the leopard off for a little while till my safety boat got there. And then it was all good. So that was when I started to get this feeling about leopards being really, really interesting, beautiful animals. First time I'd seen up close and really in their environment. The next time I saw a leopard or encountered one underwater was at a shipwreck called the Bahia Paraíso, which was a naval vessel that went down in the bay outside of Palmer Station, the American research base in the Antarctic Peninsula region. And the Bahia is a really interesting wreck to dive. She hit a rock and ripped a giant hole in her hull and sank into water was only about 40 feet deep, but then rolled over off that rock into slightly deeper water. So now she lies just about upside down in about 75 feet of water. And that makes it kind of fun to dive on her because it's like diving into a big cave. The hull is up and you can't really go in there, so you kind of go down to the bottom, and then you can swim in under the hull in a few places. The most beautiful place is under the bow, where what was the bow deck is like the roof of a cave, and there's all kinds of really gorgeous encrusting life, like sponges and ascidians and bryozoans growing off the bollards, the big places where they rigged the ropes. It's an exceptional place underwater. It's protected from ice, and that's something that's very, very important for marine life in the Antarctic, where ice can reach the place where these animals are living. It just scours them away. But under the ship, it was complete protection, so it was a perfect place and really, really rich with life. The ship had kind of a helicopter deck toward the back, so there's a lot of big, wide open spaces toward what was the back of the ship, and that's also a really neat place to explore. There's the radio room you can go into. There's a little a bathroom that's just off one of these decks. And that makes really interesting stuff to film. Of course, that was my job, was to get underwater and film interesting things for the guests on our ship to see. So I had gone into the radio room, and not all the way in. Maybe my flippers were still sticking out. I was trying to be conservative about not getting too deep into the wreck. But I was filming the telephones hanging on the wall and stuff like that, and stuck in there for, not stuck, but with my head stuck into it for a few minutes. And then I turned around, and right there at my face, as soon as I turned around, like less than arm's reach, elbows reach away, was the biggest female leopard seal I've ever seen. She was the size of a Greyhound bus. Okay, not really, but it sure looked that way when I was underwater with her. this particular leopard is well known at Palmer. She likes to bite zodiacs, and she's bitten a lot of zodiacs over the years. She hangs out there in the bay. That's kind of her territory. And for whatever reason, she's not very fond of the zodiacs. They finally had to put 5-gallon buckets over the back ends of the pontoons on the Zodes at Palmer to protect them from this particular seal. So I knew a little bit about her reputation, and I was really not at all happy of being there under the shipwreck with her, like shoulder to shoulder with me. She was not approaching me slowly and curiously. She had her head right in my face. So in that case, I just went straight up to the surface. I was not very deep. I swam out from under the wreck and made my way up to the surface. Not like swimming top speed, because that's unsafe, but as rapidly as I could. And when I got to the surface, then of course, the thing is about having an encounter with a leopard and getting up to the surface is as soon as you're there at the surface, you can't see the leopard anymore. Your head's up there looking out at the air, and the surface becomes a barrier for your sight. So your legs are still dangling down to where the leopard is, but you don't know what's going on down there. So I signaled my safety Zodiac over, and he came over right away, of course. And that was one of the very few times I've climbed back into the boat with all my weights and gear on. And that's a lot of weight. I think I dropped the camera, which is on a lanyard, so it didn't sink away. But I think I got in without the camera, which is another 40 pounds. But I was wearing like 100 pounds of gear, and I just slung myself up into the boat without even thinking about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to get out of the water right now because I don't want to be here. And then the third time I met a leopard in the water was really great encounter. And this was a place called Neptune's Bellows. It's the entrance to Port Foster, which is the big body of water inside the volcanic caldera of Deception Island up in the South Shetland Islands, just to the north of the peninsula. And Neptune's Bellows is a narrow entrance. It's got extremely strong tidal currents, and that's also very good for marine life. There are steep walls there, which help to protect the marine life from the scouring of the ice, and the current going back and forth each day brings them food. So you definitely can't dive there on a day when there's a lot of current. But if you're there for slack tide, it's a really great dive. In fact, I think it's my favorite of all the dives I've done in the Antarctic. There's a wall there that I discovered early on in my time diving there that is absolutely gorgeous, just covered with sponges and bryozoans. It's one of the very best places I've ever been in the Antarctic for nudibranchs. There are always these beautiful sea slugs there crawling over the encrusting ascidians and the sea squirts there. So I love this dive, but it's also kind of a dive you have to be really careful of because you're concerned about current. It's a moderately deep dive. The bottom of this wall is at about 85 or 90 feet. So that's kind of the deepest that I like to go without thinking very, very carefully about it. And I made the dive, totally had a great time, was on my way back up to the surface, and at the top of this little vertical wall patch, which is about 60 feet, this male leopard this time found me. And he wasn't tremendously big, but he was, after a little while, really pushily curious. As always, he would need to get a breath of air every little while, so he came and swam circles around me at a distance of maybe 30 or 40 feet and went up for a breath of air, and then came down and swam circles around me at a distance of maybe 20 feet and went up and got a breath of air and came down and swam around me about 10 feet away. And the fourth or fifth time he came down to look at me, he was right in my face. I actually had to push him away with my camera. I was shooting a big, now very old technology, high def Sony camera then, a camera with tapes, if you can believe that. This was back in the early Precambrian era of video. So, and this was a big housing. I mean, like practically the size of a footstool. So that was nice to have that camera between me and him, because he was by far the most aggressive leopard I was ever with in the water. But he gave me the chance to have the best time watching the way a leopard swam. One of the really interesting thing about this site is that there's a lot of kelp. There's a fairly low-angle shelf that leads down to the top of the wall, which then drops vertically from about 60 feet underwater. And that shelf has big kelp growing up from it, a little kelp forest there. And the leopard was spiraling down through this kelp every time he came to have another look at me. So the way I was handling it was, because he was really pushing me, I would put my back against the bottom when he was close, and so that he couldn't get behind me, and film him. I got some great shots of him and just watch him swim. And then when he went up for a breath of air, I would move a little ways toward the surface with just following the bottom. When he came back down, I'd get back in a safe position and just watch him again. And so that was all working out great, and there was no real tense moment, just a kind of slightly aggressive encounter. But what was exceptional about it was the opportunity to watch him swim over and over again. It took me a long time to surface. I guess that's really it, because I was only surfacing in short steps while he was getting a breath. And that gave me a lot of time to watch him swimming circles through the kelp, spiraling down to take another look at me. They are just amazing, beautiful animals. Always really exciting to see underwater.
This episode of Meet the Ocean was produced by Paul North and Andrew Gettings, with sound design by Kelsey Anderson and music by Vin Gast. Special thanks to polar diver David Cawthron for sharing his encounters with Antarctica's leopard seals. If you would like to find out more about these creatures, check out the Sea Leopard Project. Meet the Ocean is a listener-supported 501c3 nonprofit. The story of our planet is a story we share. You can always find more podcasts, underwater creatures, and ways to donate to our nonprofit on our website, meettheocean.org. Until next time, may the saltwater be with you.